committee meeting today. Just to let you all know, and for the purpose of those of you in at home, my name is Karen Bowen. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting today. And to let everyone who's on the call and those viewing know that this meeting is being live streamed to the internet and is being recorded for archive purposes. Any member or officer wishing to speak in the meeting, could you please use the raise your hand function during the meeting, and the chair, when appointed, will call you in to speak at the appropriate time. Could you also please ensure that your cameras are switched on when speaking as required by the legislation? If there is any issues during the meeting with your audio, you can use the chat function, but also if there are any further problems, please contact the Democratic Services Officer and they will assist you as best they can. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of chair. Could I please seek nominations from the members of the committee? Thank you. Nominations? Mrs. Tinsley? You're on mute, sorry.
Nominate Richard Hendicott if he's willing.
Oh, I don't think he says no, so could I Mr. Watkins?
No, that was going to be my nomination as well.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? I see no further hands up, so in that case, Mr. Hendicott, you're duly elected chair for the meeting, and if you don't mind, I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Well, good morning and thank you very much, and thank you for your confidence. For the appointment of vice chair, could I have some nominations, please?
I nominate Lorna Tinsley if she's willing.
I'm more than happy to second that. Any other nominations? Lorna, assuming you're happy to carry on.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Next item is apologies for absence, and actually it looks as if we've got a full house here today, haven't we?
That's correct, Chair.
All the councillors and all the independents, so that's good, and we'll hear about the town and community councillor nomination in due course. Moving on, item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March. I've read through those and they seem an accurate record. Anybody any points to make? No? You're all shaking your head, so hopefully you all approve. So that they will be taken as a true record of that meeting. Item 5, to receive any declaration of interest and the nature of such interests. Are there any? No, nobody. No. Good. Okay. So there's nothing there. Right. So we'll now move on to the reports of the monitoring officer and item 6, which is the applications for dispensation. Perhaps Debbie, you'll take us to those.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So you have before you this morning 3 applications. There's a brief overview at paragraph 2.1 of the report, and then the applications appended as usual. So the first application is from Councillor Gwyn John in his capacity as a Vale councillor and also councillor on Llantydd Major Town Council. And it's to speak and vote in respect of issues relating to the Royal British Legion, as I say, at both council meetings. The paragraphs being relied upon, I should also highlight the dispensation is sought up until the next elections, ordinary elections 2027. The grounds being relied on are D, E and F. D and F, I'd suggest, are relevant. Ground E, and you have the grounds appended to the report. Ground E is the interest is common to the member and a significant proportion of the general public. I don't think that necessarily applies, but certainly grounds D and F, which relate to the participation, would not damage public confidence, and F, the participation in the business to which the interest relates, is justified by the member's particular role or expertise. I think if you're in agreement, are relevant here. And highlighted on the application is the fact that Councillor Gwyn John is the president of the Llantrip Major Royal British Legion and has been since March 2023. So a matter for committee, but I don't see any issues other than to only rely upon grounds D and F.
Thank you. Is everybody happy to follow the recommendation there? You're all nodding. Thank you, Debbie. Yes, so that'll be just D and F, but to speak and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning on to the second application, and this is from the Community Councillor Linda Green of Llanmaes Community Council. Now, this application is to speak and vote, and it relates to the duration of the application. It's not up until the next ordinary elections, but during consideration at the Community Council of the matters relating to the replacement local development plan. So once they've concluded their deliberations and submitted their representations, the dispensation, if granted, would then come to an end. I think it's important to highlight certainly grounds D, E and I are being relied upon. So D being participation would not damage public confidence. E, the interest is common to the member in a significant proportion of the general public. And I is being relied upon, it appears to the Standards Committee, to be in the interest of the inhabitants of the area of the council that the disability should be removed. I think I is does have relevance here. However, I would suggest bearing in mind the details of the prejudicial interest, which you'll see is set out on the appended application, that Councillor Green is referring to the fact that the Community Council are reviewing the current proposed sites for the next LDP, the replacement LDP, and one field would classify her as a neighbour. So I think certainly with regards to that close proximity to her property, I would preclude that aspect. So you may wish to grant her permission to speak, but not vote on that particular aspect. But elsewhere in the application, it does refer to various parcels of land. I appreciate that Llanmaes is a relatively small community, but I think obviously the ground with regards to the interests of the inhabitants is relevant, but not whether it is that close proximity to the members' property. I would also add that we've received no other applications from other members, so there isn't, based on what's been presented to us, there isn't a concern about the Community Council being correct when considering that particular field. So my recommendation is to grant the dispensation based on I, or to give consideration based on ground I, but to speak only.
Yeah.
Okay, so speak only, and it's just on I then, is it, Debbie? Thank you.
Yes.
Lorna?
Thank you, Richard. There's no potential here for any other areas of land to come under this distinction, is there? The LDP is set, there's not going to be further proposal anyway, that she might find herself in difficulties as the plan is reviewed and proposals amended?
I think as it evolves, obviously the members would need to be mindful At that point, if they deem appropriate, to then submit a further application. As you're aware, there is a delegation granted to myself in consultation with the chair if there's a need to respond swiftly and prior to the next ordinary meeting of this committee. But I think it's fair to say we can, or the members can only go on what is before them at this stage.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Councillor Franks?
Thank you. This is just for clarity. When I first read this application, I thought, well, this means every councillor at every level in the Vale will have to declare an interest, because we'll all be discussing the replacement LDP. But if I'm right in hearing, it is because the applicant has got a particular plot of land. Right. Okay. So you won't be expecting 750 applications then, Debbie, I take it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, on that basis, do we agree that, do we accept the recommendation to speak only? Yes, everybody's agreeable with that. Good. Thank you. The next application is Helen Payne.
It is. So this application is being submitted in respect of Vale of Glamorgan council meetings, and it's highlighted in paragraph 2.1. It's to speak and vote on matters relating to housing and homelessness at the Vale of Glamorgan council meetings. It's an application to speak and vote. The grounds being relied upon are C, D, E, F and H. I'll come back to those grounds shortly. The prejudicial interest being referred to is that Councillor Payne is employed by Llanmai and is also the vice chair of the Vale Youth Forum, and also highlighted on the application form as a reason to support the application. I think of particular relevance is the fact that she has particular knowledge because of her background, her employment, which she feels would be useful to enable her to speak. She doesn't refer to voting at that point, but to speak and use her knowledge to contribute to the debate, albeit that she does go on to say as part of the decision-making process. The reason I wanted to come back at the end to the grounds being relied upon, so you have the grounds set out in the appendix to the report, but of particular relevance, Councillor Payne is referring to ground H, and this is something that we have looked at closely in the past, and I will read it out for the benefit of members of the public that may be viewing this. The business relates to the finances or property of a voluntary organisation of whose management committee or board the member is a member otherwise than as a representative of the council, and the member has no other interest in that business, provided that any dispensation shall not extend to participation in any vote with respect to that business. So ground H does preclude the dispensation from voting, sorry, so it would only be to speak. So bearing in mind that ground has been cited and given the commentary as I referred to as reasons on the application, you may wish to, in the circumstances, grant the dispensation as requested, subject to it being restricted to speak only.
Okay, are we happy to follow that recommendation? Mr. Alexander, Roddy?
Thank you. I did have one observation on this. I'm not sure whether or not it's relevant, and if it's not relevant, Debbie, I'm very happy to be told so. In reason to support the application, I just read the third line, and a previous complaint made by another member. So I just wondered if that had any relevance to this, and if so, what relevance? Thank you.
I think it's fair to say that complaints could be, I suppose, construed in different ways. It's certainly not a complaint that was referred through the process to myself as monitoring officer, or indeed through the local dispute resolution procedure. It might be maybe more appropriate to say a comment or observation, so it's not a formal complaint.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. But subject to that, are we happy to accept the recommendation?
Yes.
Everybody agreeing? Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. I think that deals with the those applications. Observations by independent members of town and community council committee meetings. Anybody want to volunteer? Patricia, Pat, your hand's up. Would you like to start off?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually attended 2 observations. The first one was on the 3rd of April when I attended Pentline County meeting. I was welcomed by the clerk and the chairman. At the start of the meeting, the chair introduced me to all the members and asked the members to introduce themselves, which they did. Unfortunately, there were no name cards in front of them, and there was quite a number of them, and it was very difficult to keep tabs as to who was who. So it would be helpful if that was remedied. The room was well lit, and I could hear what was being said very clearly. There was a large screen at the bottom of the long table that they were sitting at, which actually displayed the agenda and papers, which I found very useful. And this is the first committee meeting that I've been to where they'd actually done that. If I was a member of the public, I would have found that very helpful because they actually identified line by line where they were. The meeting started on time. The rulings of the chair were adhered to, and the members were respectful and courteous. The members were very knowledgeable and often provided relevant background information, making discussions more meaningful, which give you, as a member of the public, I would have appreciated that, just to have a background on what the whole issue was about. The meeting was particularly well chaired in respect of time management and the agenda. All members were given an opportunity to speak and discuss and kept relevant issues being considered. The meeting was ably supported by the clerk and contributed to the smooth running of the meeting. This was a really good meeting. It's one of the best meetings I've ever been to, and I would recommend that anyone wanted to observe that this would be used for good practice. Our second meeting was on the 5th of April. By the way, I attended that meeting in person. The second meeting I went to was St. Donat's, and I attended online via Google. The chair introduced himself and asked the members to introduce themselves. The name cards were too far away from the camera, which was videoing the meeting. The camera recording the meeting was at an angle that allowed only the members on the left side of the table to be seen, and the right side of the table could only be seen if people leaned forward, and they were so far away you couldn't see faces anyway. I commented on this at the start of the meeting to the chair, and was informed by a member who laughed and said, well, they'll just have to lean forward, won't they? The chair did nothing about it and proceeded with the meeting, which made it very difficult for me to observe as to what was going on. It was difficult to know who was saying what on the right side of the table. I could not comment on question 7, the size of the room, or the copies of the agenda, because I could not see the whole room. The discussions on the agenda items appeared to be agreed upon, but it was not always clear what the resulting decisions were, and I could not hear the chair request any formal motions and seconding on agenda items. The members were well known to one another, and there was banter throughout the whole of the meeting. In declaring personal interest, there was confusion and appeared to be a lack of understanding about whether a member who had a personal interest should leave the room or not. And this involved the chair as well, as he was confused as to what he should be able to do. The clerk was also unclear in providing advice. The clerk stated that she would seek advice and clarity on the personal interest from Democratic Services. I would comment that with regard to the decisions made and motions and seconding, and also an understanding of personal and prejudice interested, I would recommend that further training is given on these issues as soon as possible. I would also suggest as well that once the training had been undertaken, that a further observation of this committee is undertaken by myself or one of my colleagues. It was not the best of meetings. Oh, just
Thank-
one more thing. I
Yes,
attended
lovely.
the Llancarvan meeting and had a problem with actually connecting online. So that was cancelled with the agreement of the chair. We arranged to be meeting again on the 15th. So that'll be undertaken then. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any others?
Yes.
Gerwin,
Yes, can you hear me?
yes.
I attended a live meeting of the St. Bride's Community Council on the 17th of April. No, 17th of May, sorry. 17th of May. The meeting is held in All Saints Church in Southerndown. It's actually held in the church, which has movable furniture. There was plenty of room for the public to attend. The lighting was excellent. The acoustics are very good. It was a very amicable and well-conducted meeting. The only item I would mention was that there was no declaration of interest on the agenda, and there was no mention of it in the minutes of the previous meeting. At the end of the meeting, there was an opportunity for members to raise items of interest. It wasn't classed as A or B on the agenda, but it happened. During that discussion, the chairman declared an interest. It wasn't clear to me whether the interest was prejudicial or personal or whatever, and there was no discussion on the point. I comment on it because we'll see that this point was raised in the meeting that the monitoring officer has with clerks. That meeting was on the 28th of April. My meeting, which I attended, was on the 17th of May.
Thank you, Gerwin. Ronnie?
Thank you. I had the pleasure, and I say pleasure, of attending Landau Community Council on the 1st of the 6th. This was a meeting which was, I'll mention this at the beginning because I think it's a particularly important point. It was chaired with precision. And forgive me if I'm not engaging in eye-to-eye contact on the screen with you at the moment. I'm just reading my report on another screen. I was welcomed at the commencement of the meeting by the chair. I attended remotely, and so did several other members of the Community Council, but there were some who were in Landau Village Hall. It was not possible for me to specifically identify the clerk, but I've been to this Community Council before, and so based on my previous knowledge, I was aware of who that person was. As I've said, 5 attended remotely and could not necessarily specifically be identified from their iPads or computer screens. A number were in Landau Village Hall, but I was unable to see name cards. The Village Hall was clearly lit, and it was also entirely possible to see everyone by Zoom. The room was an appropriate size, and I received my papers well in advance by email. The meeting ran to time. My one observation in relation to the process of the meeting is that there does not appear to be an opportunity for public speaking, and that certainly wasn't clear to me by reference to the agenda. Decisions were properly moved and seconded, and I have no concerns as to that. A member did declare an interest and removed themselves from the meeting by Zoom when that subject was being discussed, and then were subsequently invited back to the room and were readmitted for the next item. The meeting ended at 20:35. My general observations are that this was a purposeful and focused meeting, which was particularly well chaired. So apart from the issue of name cards and the opportunity on the agenda for public speaking, I am entirely content. There was a subsidiary aspect to this meeting, which I have raised with Democratic Services and which they are investigating. And I don't wish to comment further on that aspect at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lorna?
Thank you. Well, on our last meeting, I commented on 2 meetings I've been to for St Athan and Wenvo. And I obviously been lulled into a false sense of security because they are both very good meetings. And then I was asked to attend Llangan Community Council. And where do you start? No introductions, no welcome. I could have not even been on screen. It was an on-screen meeting. There had been a request for meetings to be held in person, which was poo-pooed during the meeting. There was no appetite from them for that, but it was discussed. The names on the screens and the people didn't correspond. So we had an interesting guessing who was who. One councillor in particular had sound issues, and it was very difficult to hear what he was saying. And the chair would step in and repeat what he had said. Unfortunately, and on questions he'd asked, unfortunately, the meeting got very tense. And so not only was she repeating what he'd said, but she was also having to deal with an attitude that was clear on screen, but not in words. So that was very exciting. The meeting continued more or less as it should, and then out of nowhere, there was just this ball of tension that erupted, with 2 councillors having a ping pong match across the Zoom, one calling the other lazy, asking for somebody to step in and do some further work that she was unable to undertake. It was a very big commitment in terms of planning. The councillor said he couldn't do it. She then said he was lazy. He then said, I'm a businessman. He then had another little temper tantrum about that and left the screen and then came back. Then it was raised that they were aware that a complaint had been lodged. Now, I knew that their complaint was in the ether and had deliberately not asked for any details so I could approach the meeting as unbiased as I could be. And they were aware of a complaint that had been raised, no details of that. But as part of that, there'd been a request for Democratic Services to obtain the recording of the meeting. And the particular councillor refused that request under data protection was one of the reasons he raised, but generally couldn't really articulate why he was objecting. That went round in a circle for a little while. He then said, I can't participate in this meeting any further, left the screen, and then rejoined the screen at a later date. No explanation, no nothing, just rejoined. So when we got to the end of the meeting, the chair then, who was chairing well, given what she was having to chair, then said, thank you for joining us, Mrs. Tinsley. What will you have to say about us? There was a pause, and my response was that there would be feedback to Standards Committee, and in due course that feedback would be fed back to them, because I couldn't really say anything else. It was an experience.
Well done. Right. Okay. Thanks. Well, I visited Peterston Super Ely on the 15th of May. And that was an interesting experience for me because I used to live in Peterston, so going back after many years. No, I wasn't welcomed, or they weren't advised I was there. The clerk thought I was attending remotely, but I don't think I'd ever said that. There was no agenda. I had been sent the agenda of the AGM, but not the agenda of the meeting, so it was very difficult to follow what was going on. it wasn't clear where people should sit or do. I started to get a chair myself, and I was told where the public could sit. So there were 5 councillors in a row, or one to the side, 4 on one to the side, and then there were 3 people facing. Initially I thought they were part of the council. It turns out they were members of the public, and so I sat alongside them. Room was well lit. I couldn't hear everything that was going on. For the first hour or so, there was table tennis being played in the adjoining room. And it was quite clear that some of the members couldn't hear. There were only 5 there. They couldn't, and they were sort of looking at each other, and they couldn't hear what was going on the other part of the room. So that was very poor, I thought. There were no name cards. It was the AGM, so they appointed a new chairman. The chairman said, well, I'll do it if nobody else wants to do it. And somebody said, well, do you want to do it? Well, I don't mind. Well, what about you? Yes. What about? And in the end, a lady said, yes, I'll do it. And so she took over as chair, and she's very pleasant and very good. But in my notes, I said, I'm not sure she was expecting to do the job. There were lots of periods of silence, and some items, for example, they were discussing cars speeding through the village. The local policeman turned up. That was discussed at 3 or 4 different times in the meeting. Having discussed it, they seemed to come back to it. The members all got very well and on very well. The local independent councillor turned up and was good. It appeared to be an active and effective council. But the meeting didn't end until 9:45. So it took 2 3/4 hours, which is far too long in my mind. It's almost past my bedtime. And my note is that hopefully the meetings will become more professional, in inverted commas, and last, 1.5 hours or at most 2 hours. But I think possibly it was because this new chairman wasn't prepared, and that was the cause of the length of the meeting. But there was an awful lot of repetition and silences. So good. We've been sent a list of others, so I think we can keep this up for the next, presumably it'll be June and July, then there'll be a break in August, and we'll report back. All right, Debbie?
All I was going to add, and obviously there are certain community council that need to be revisited, as has been identified during the course of the presentation from the committee. But there is a second recommendation on the report that where town and community council meetings which have been observed are being managed effectively, there's a suggestion, a recommendation for your consideration that and if there are no material issues identified, that those observations going forward should be on a biennial basis, so every other year, unless, as is picked up in recommendation 3, unless issues do arise and it's recommended by myself that a meeting, an observation is held sooner than on the biennial basis. So a matter for the committee to consider that particular recommendation.
Yes, I agree with that. I should have added that this declaration of interest seems to be a problem everywhere. I was, are there any declaration of interest? No. And then sort of 2 hours in, a lady there who's chairman of the Wyndham Park Residents Association, they were talking about the road to Wyndham Park, where I happen to live. And she said, well, I'm declaring an interest as chair of the Windham Park Residents Association, and then just carried on. So people don't know what it's for. It's not. It wasn't an item as such on the agenda. I don't think, because I didn't see the agenda, but it was raised like that. Councillor Birch, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the Llangan Community Council that Mrs. Tinsley went to, where she said that there'd been a request for Democratic Services to have a recording of a meeting, but a councillor refused this. Is a councillor able to do that? That sounds bizarre to me. These are matters of public record, surely.
Debbie, do you want to answer that?
Yes, can I assist there? And it might be that Karen has got some further information as well. I spoke directly with the clerk prior to the meeting that Mrs. Tinsley attended, because there had been I would say it was a concern that had been raised. It wasn't a formal complaint. I'd gone back to the individual that had emailed me about certain concerns and asked whether there was a wish to progress that as a complaint, and how it was to be progressed, and whether the individual was happy for me to raise the matter with the member that there was concern about. So behind the scenes, that was ongoing. The person that raised the concern didn't want it to be progressed, which was rather unfortunate. But there was a conversation, a meeting with the clerk. I believe also the chair had been invited to that meeting, but was not available to attend. I did ask for the footage of the meeting. Now, my understanding of that was that the footage is not uploaded onto YouTube, so it wasn't freely available. And when I asked for the footage, and indeed asked for the footage for the meeting that Mrs. Tinsley was due to attend, I was told that the committee, or the council, sorry, had agreed for meetings to be recorded solely to assist with the minute taking, and it was not available more broadly. I asked for that to be relayed, advising that the monitoring officer was requesting the footage, and I have shall we say, I'm still awaiting a response and haven't received that footage. So there does appear to be a sort of a potential breakdown in communication there, either between the clerk and the chair, or the chair and then back to the clerk and a response back. But it has been requested, but certainly it's not footage which is freely available, and that was the rationale provided. Hence, it was felt there was a need for a follow-up observation by an independent member to the next meeting.
Thank you, Ronnie.
But sorry, if I could just come back on that. Yes. But are you legally able to demand that footage and be given it? I mean, we're all being very polite about requests and so forth, but I mean, what's the actual legal position on this?
It's whether it is still available. It was just for the minute taking purposes, so that appears to be the issue, the purpose for which it was being recorded, and then the duration for which the footage was maintained. So yes, I agree, not entirely satisfactory, but hence the follow-up observations, and of course there will be a follow-up meeting with the clerk and with the chair, as is our normal practice when such concerns are raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Ronnie?
Thanks. This is a different point. I just wanted to come back to Debbie's suggestion as to the frequency with which meetings are attended, and say that I support that. But also I have a more general observation. What's clear to me, and I'm sure to everyone else, is that there is a considerable variation in the way that these meetings are run. and some are exemplars of good practice, and some, shall we say, are rather less satisfactory. And I just wondered if there was any opportunity for how the good practice from the exemplars might usefully be disseminated to those that are less good. Because if there's no action taken that is, as it were, corrective, then that pattern of unsatisfaction or unsatisfactory process will simply continue. And I just wondered, Debbie, about how we can ensure that there is actually improvement. Thank you.
I think there's some sort of, I suppose, links into the report later on the agenda about the work that's undertaken with not just having the follow-up meeting with the clerks and the chair, but also having that opportunity to speak to all of the clerks, so that there is sharing of good practice and also highlighting where there isn't particularly good practice. Because of the variation in the hours that clerks work, and some of the clerks are only employed for a few hours each week. Of course, we can't, when I'm convening those meetings, manage to get all clerks to attend, and hence we've moved to recording those meetings and sharing the recording with all clerks. So all clerks have access to those meetings and the sharing of good practice and highlighting where there are generic areas of concern. So they all have access to that. I think that that there's merit in considering where there is, shall we say, no signs of adherence to that, and repeat poor practice, that there may be merit in inviting the chair and the clerk to a standards committee, or alternatively to a meeting outside this with the chair. But I think where there is no improvement, that they're bearing in mind all the measures that we have in place, but where there is no improvement, that I think there is merit in inviting the chair and the clerk, as I say, to the standards committee.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we can move on from item 7 to. In which report? Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, yeah. Do we agree with Debbie's proposals there? Sorry, I should have formally taken that. Basically about the biannual.
Yes.
I'm never sure if a biannual is 6 months or 2 years. I think you can mean either, but you mean every other year. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Right, the Draft Standards Committee annual report. This has been prepared, I have to say, by Debbie and her staff, and is very good. This I don't propose to go through this line by line or in any detail. I would be happy to receive any specific comments as we go through, or if there are any general comments people want to make. But I think if we go through it line by line, we could be here for quite a while. There are a few items, perhaps I can just say that, having considered it myself, that I want to consider raising and putting in the report. And I think the best way of dealing with this is that once we've discussed it, if you're happy, Debbie and I will go away and think of and consider what's been said and make an amended report if that's necessary, rather than trying to change it here today. Where there's an item on applications for dispensation, I think there should be some comment on the delay by by lots of councillors to making these applications, and the number of last-minute applications that we received. We had to, if you remember, have call a special meeting because they were so late. So I think there's some reference could be made to that. With regard to the observations that we have carried out, before I've heard today's meetings, I was going today's reports. I was going to suggest that something like that. I was pleased to see that there had been a considerable improvement in council meetings. I can see you laughing, Lorna. And I think that's generally the case, that this is having a good effect. So I think we perhaps, Debbie, we can tweak that a little and say in the majority of cases that there has been a considerable improvement, but subject to that, but there are issues that we need to follow up, and we can deal with that. There's reference here to the meetings that we had with various members, including independent members. One member we were unable to organise a meeting with, and I think reference should be made to that so that the council know exactly what the position was. Lorna, would you like to comment generally on it, or how do you know, what are your thoughts?
Actually, I think you've covered most of my thoughts on it. I mean, yes, I am conscious that it would have been lovely to say that we'd seen a significant improvement, and that's why I reflected the two previous meetings I'd attended, because I did feel during the last 12 months that was the general direction of travel. It's just unfortunate that my last one was such an interesting meeting. I don't think there's anything further to what you've said, Richard. It's a very difficult one to write in a way, because you want to show that we've had an impact and we have had those improvements, and then to capture that, the efforts that we've made and that the community councils have made along those roads. But at the same time, there are recurring themes, as we've said. So I think it's really important that we highlight those recurring themes in this document, so that we can next year reflect back and say, well, actually, what have we done to particularly target those particular areas?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to throw it open. Are there any hands going up? Does anybody want to comment generally on the report or specifically? Ooh, silence. Good. Ronnie.
Thank you. Just a general comment, if I may, and a very brief one, please. I've read through it, and I thought it was a very comprehensive report. And subject to the comments that have just been made, I, on a personal level, I'm entirely content with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerwin?
Yes, I thought it was a comprehensive report as well. Could I ask one question? At top of page 5 of the draft, the mention of the monitoring officer's delegated authority. Could I ask how many times has that authority been exercised?
I think you should have given prior notice of that.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't. Debbie, have you got that information?
We can certainly factor that in. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It is very infrequent.
Yes,
and I think during last municipal year, or the financial year, because this runs April to March, I don't think we used it last year, but we will certainly factor that in.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Because if you're not having to use the power, it suggests that applications are coming in on time.
Right. Well, I think they're one or two. Anyway, Karen?
Only just a comment, Chair. It's my fault. If you look at page 3 in paragraph 2, and I just wanted to make sure that this was highlighted, it does refer to the 23rd of June 23, and it goes on to 23. That should read 22. So it's a typographical error, and that's my fault. I'll get that amended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pat, your hand is up. You're mute.
Just to say that I totally agree with everything that's been said. And I think the issue of late applications for dispensation, you're correct in bringing that up. It has been a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Debbie, your hand's up, but is there anything particular?
Shall I come in at
Yes.
the, I think all other members
Yes.
have spoken. I wanted in particular to draw members' attention to a small paragraph, but it's a very important paragraph. It's on page 9 of the report, and maybe we could put it in bold, but as members of the committee are aware, there's a new statutory duty that has come in from the 5th of May relating to political group leaders, and that's referred to partway through page 8. And as part of the legislative requirements, we're required within the body of the annual report to provide an assessment as to whether there's satisfaction that the political group leaders have adhered to their statutory duty. So page 9, the last part, the paragraph of that section, reference is made there to have regard to the engagement by political group leaders. The Standards Committee is satisfied that the same have met their statutory duty in line with section 62 of the Act. And this links in then with the documents which are appended to the report at Appendix C and B. So the political group leaders were required to complete the form, the promoting compliance with Code of Conduct, and their responses are set out in Appendix C. And as committee are aware, the chair and myself have met on a couple of occasions with each of the political group leaders regarding their duty. Training has been provided, and also good engagement with regards to that statutory duty. So I just wanted to particularly highlight that. The other point to highlight is picking up the point that Richard mentioned at the outset, that a delegated authority, an additional recommendation be added to give a delegated authority to myself as monitoring officer, head of legal and democratic services, in consultation with the chair to finalise the wording on the annual report, having regard to the comments made this morning, so that we can finalise the report and refer it to council at its meeting on the 24th of July. So I'd make that recommendation. I'd also just finally just say, of course, there is the opportunity, if members of the committee wish to make recommendations to council, so we'll be referring the report, but if there are any specific concerns, and I think possibly the issue about timing of dispensation applications being one, that there is that opportunity for specific recommendations to be made to council. So possibly you can draw that out, as I say, and ask to remind members and ask them to be in a timely manner, bearing in mind, I suppose it's the point, albeit the urgent process and the delegated authority, considering dispensations wasn't used, but there was the need for a special committee meeting to deal with the applications, it being, I suppose, tempered with the fact that it was, shall we say, an election year last year, so we had a lot of new members, so I think that might account for some of the delay, but certainly it did necessitate a special standards committee to deal with those applications.
Thank you, Debbie. When does this report have to be in?
The legislation refers to as soon as reasonably practicable. The timeline in the legislation of 3 months is that the council needs to consider the annual report from Standards Committee within 3 months of it being submitted or being approved by Standards Committee. So there isn't a strict time scale.
Yes,
for
but what
this
I
committee.
thought was, if we can do a bit more work in just amending it, making those amendments, and before it goes in, it's sent to each member of this committee for their approval to see what we've done, so that the committee know exactly what the report's going to say. Okay, we can deal with that on that basis, can we, Debbie?
Yes, yes, we
Good.
can do that.
Okay. Well, so are you happy to accept that the basis of moving forward, everybody?
Yes.
The recommendations, and this is the main skeleton of the report with a couple of alterations. Good. Thank you very much. We move on to item 9, which is the monitoring officer's meetings with the clerks of the Town and Community Council. Debbie, this is you.
Yes, I think it's a fairly comprehensive. I can pull out some key points, but
Well,
it is as set out in the report. So
yes.
happy to take any questions.
No, I assume everybody's read it. So, any issues or questions? No. Good. All right. Number 10, the internal audit report in respect of elected members.
Yes. So as it refers, an internal audit has been undertaken with regards to members. A number of elements of that internal audit. Firstly, as I've referred to, last year, May, we saw the election, the local government election. So part of the audit looked at qualifying criteria to make sure that all 54 members satisfied one of the 4 requirements to qualify. So very pleased to say, yes, they did. So that was the first element. Also, the audit confirmed that all members had signed the declaration on the nomination form, so that had all been satisfied. The audit also looked at whether all members had signed their declaration of acceptance of office and undertaking to abide by the Members' Code of Conduct within the statutory timescale, which is 28 days. And that was also noted as having been complied with. The audit also looked at the training requirements, or the attendance at the mandatory training, and paragraphs 210 referred to that. So, albeit there were some delays on the part of a few members, the training was eventually attended by all, mandatory training. And the last element of the audit, which was considered, was with regards to the DBS checks. So Cabinet, by way of background, Cabinet back on the 11th of April 2022 had resolved that all members would have a basic DBS check with those members that held specific roles and responsibilities having an enhanced DBS check. And again, the report refers to how that was dealt with, and that after a slight delay on the part of a number of members, that was fully adhered to. So from internal audit's perspective, we've been given a positive outcome. I did touch base with colleagues in our regional internal audit team to see whether they would wish to attend this morning to give an overview, but I was advised that as they felt that everything was satisfactory, that they were happy with the report as drafted to be presented this morning, and for me to give you that overview. So yes, a positive outcome to the internal audit.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on that? Yes, Ronnie.
Thanks. Very much, Chair. Debbie, it's very good to have that positive outcome or positive finding as a result of the internal audit investigation. But when I look at audit reports, which I do in a number of fora, it's usual for audit to actually give an assurance finding of reasonable assurance or somewhat less than that. I just wondered why the normal audit process hadn't been followed on this occasion in terms of outcome. I'm not really accustomed to hearing the term positive.
No, can I just say that we have had an audit report which, on reflection, I think should be shared and should have been appended to this report. So we will circulate that for members of the Standards Committee. I think from this report, you're just seeing my extracting details from the actual internal audit report. But I'd suggest that we share that, and for the record, we'll bring it to the next meeting just for information, so it is sort of in the public domain. So we will share that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think so. We don't have to do anything apart from note. That's noted. Item 11, the response to the Welsh Government consultation on the recommendations of the independent review, the Richard Penn report. You will see that Debbie and her team have prepared some draft answers. Again, hopefully we can avoid going through debating them all again, as it were. But what I propose to do is go through reasonably quickly, and if anybody wants to comment or doesn't agree with the response, please do so that you can all make a correspondence, all make a contribution. So we go to question 1. Do you agree that relevant regulations? And then you'll see the answer there. Anybody want to comment or unless you want to comment or disagree, I'll take silence as meaning you agree. Okay, no issue there. Question 2, restricted reporting orders. Everybody happy with that? Good. 3, should there be express legal provision to enable the APW to protect the anonymity of witnesses? Yes. 4, do you support the proposed changes to the permission to appeal procedure? Yes. Should there be an express power for the APW to summon witnesses to appeal tribunal? Yes. I think that seems to be essential. Should there be changes in the Gerwyn?
On question 5.
Yep.
Who is to serve these summons? What's the consequence of not responding to it?
Good question. Don't suppose the court bailiffs will do it anymore.
Well, that's right.
Yes.
I mean, not normally. If a summons isn't adhered to, a warrant can follow.
Yeah.
In other systems, but is it going to apply here? And if so, who's going to execute it?
Good. Very good question, Debbie. And do you have an answer? If not, we'll raise that.
I would suggest that we just add that in for consideration be given to the practicalities and logistics. This is a request that's come from the adjudication panel for Wales, rather than from Standards Committee itself and monitoring officers, albeit it is supported if it's going to assist with the smooth running of their hearings. But yes, I think those practical points can be flagged up.
I know that Gerwyn in his previous life had to deal with a lot of these, and what happens if you are summoned and you don't turn up? It's a quasi-judicial role then. I wouldn't have thought they would have powers to imprison. I doubt it. Anyway, thank you, Gerwyn. That's a very good point. Should there be any changes in the procedure for referring appeals decisions back to standard committees? No. And question 7. Part to be held in private. Are we happy with that? I think the general rule should be it's in public, but if there are issues that need to be in private, then so be it. I think that's right. Do you agree that the requirement to provide not less than 7 days notice of a postponement to a hearing should be restrained? What exactly is that one, Debbie?
Again, this is a matter relating to the adjudication panel for Wales.
Yeah.
And so it's a point that they've particularly raised.
Yeah.
I must admit, when I was dealing with this, I did think, well, if they feel strongly, it's a matter for them to bearing in mind it's their procedure, it's their aspect. It's really a matter for them. So I didn't really feel that it was, for us to come down one way or the other. I mean, I suppose if they feel that it would be of assistance, but I suppose 7 days notice does appear to be reasonable, but and this is a view which is shared with other monitoring officers across Wales. It does seem to be particularly APW sort of focused. I think this, but yes, it's if there's going to be a postponement, in effect, that the APW provide at least 7 days notice.
Yeah. Usually referring to giving 7 days notice is fraught with difficulties. Is it 7 working days? What happens if there's a bank holiday? If does time run, etc., etc.? I always used to prefer to have dates in, but I think your reply is fine. Right. Should there be a wider range of sanctions available? Yes. No issues there.
Chairman, I just wonder about the word apology. I mean, to me, the essence of an apology is that it's voluntarily given. If you're told to apologize, then in my mind, it's not an apology.
Good point. Debbie?
Can I come in here? I think, and again, this is focusing at this point with regards to the APW. I think it's fair to say that when we've had hearings under the Wales Local Dispute Resolution Procedure, there have been occasions where it's been felt by the panel convened to deal with that that albeit a censure might not be required, there's nothing below a censure, and we have indeed previous independent members on our panel has felt there's a need for at least something, an apology or a training, and of course we've been restricted in not being able to direct that. And I think the APW also feel that they're in a similar difficulty. And I take the point, but it goes quite some way with regard to the complainant if an apology is given. My view is it does to a certain extent plug that gap. But I do take Mr. Watkins' the point.
I think sometimes people often say all I wanted was an apology, so I think it covers that scenario. Ronnie.
Thank you, Chair. I do indeed agree that people sometimes say all I wanted was an apology, but my experience, again from elsewhere, is that some apologies are shall I say, proper apologies. They're clear and specific, and they do make, as it were, the point about repentance. Others are rather more grudging and really don't amount to much of an apology at all. So I think I agree with the response, but I think the apology mechanism is fraught with practical difficulties. Thank you.
Okay, but that answer is acceptable. Right. Question 10A. This, of course, has particular relevance for our council, bearing in mind the history we've had over the last 3 or 4 years. And Debbie's been very careful in her answers to it after quite a bit of consideration. Do you want to speak to it, Debbie, at this stage?
Yes, please. I think I've certainly gone further than some of my monitoring officer colleagues across Wales because of some of our experiences. But flagging up where there have been concerns with regards to the wording of the current legislation, which in part has I suppose caused difficulties on with regards to evidence in progressing with applications of interim case tribunals for suspension. So I flagged that up. I've also flagged up, as will be seen by the response, that we've got to be careful here that we don't repeat, shall we say, some of or the concern that I've noted in the 2000 Act by the legislation. So there really does need to be that care taken when amending the legislation, so that there is this balance and appreciation that there may be requests being made of the Ombudsman to use the statutory power where detailed evidence cannot be made available because it relates to an ongoing police investigation or a matter which is before the court. So it's to get that balance. So hopefully, and it is a matter that I've spoken to the Ombudsman's office and indeed Welsh Government on. So I think it's a point that they'll be appreciative of, and indeed you'll see from the question that the proposal is to change the law. So they're saying, do you support the proposed amendment? So I think we're pushing at an open door here. There is going to be a change to enable the mechanism to be used to support interim suspensions when deemed appropriate by the Ombudsman. There is one addition that I think we I'd suggest make to the response, and it's in the second paragraph, the paragraph beginning by way of comparison. I think partway through there's a sentence which begins, no such similar provision exists in relation to members. And having liaised with the Director of Social Services, who I know is equally concerned about the restriction in the 2000 Act, between us we agreed to recommend to Standards Committee that we also add in relation to members, even when there are very serious safeguarding concerns. So I'd recommend that we add those additional words into that paragraph.
Thank you. Is there I've been going on for some time, and is this a place where we should consider introducing that there should be automatic suspension for somebody who is charged with an offence that carries a term of imprisonment of whatever, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? Debbie, is there any merit in that? Is that so that it's automatic? I think to take the doubt away.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we can add that into the response. So automatic
Gerwyn,
suspension.
with your criminal background, sorry, dealing with criminal matters, not your criminal background. What would you agree to anything? Or is there anything you can? Is there a terminology that you can use about offences?
Yes, you could fix a term of imprisonment, the offence carrying a term of imprisonment, and suspension could be automatic if you're facing such a charge.
Yeah,
it's as you implied. It's where you pitch it that matters.
Yes,
because
yes.
There are some quite serious offences that perhaps don't carry imprisonment at all. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, but I happen to think, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the case we had here, but when it has a serious case of people that for the public, in the public mind, once, I know they're not convicted, but once they're charged, it's a serious matter. Do we want to strengthen our response to that or leave it as drafted? I'll take silence to mean that you leave it as drafted. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, I know I suppose we've been on a journey, haven't we, with the Richard Penn report. We've had a meeting with Richard Penn, who concluded his report in 2021. Certainly, the Welsh Government consultation picks up on the recommendations of Richard Penn, which we had the opportunity to inform. But I mean, we could certainly add in the consideration, or even if it's guidance for the Ombudsman might be of assistance. But I can certainly add in a paragraph and maybe another delegated authority to myself in consultation with the chair, that some guidance to support the Ombudsman may be of assistance in this area, particularly with regards to matters where there is, I suppose even in part, a potential term of imprisonment. But sometimes I think, as you know, and obviously a number of lawyers on the call on this meeting, to put everything into a piece of legislation is not always that easy to cover all the various permutations, but to have some statutory guidance supporting it does allow for that additional support to be made available. So certainly I think we can capture something within the response to that effect if the committee's in agreement.
Well, I don't know if the meeting agrees with me or capture the feeling of the meeting. I just think these powers are not strong enough, and they haven't been used, as I understand it. Is that right, Debbie? And really, unless you murdered a partner, you wonder where on earth it would be used. And I think it's for the public, the way the public look at and have faith in our councillors, that should be the case. It's quite interesting to compare the position with Parliament these days, where their standards committee are, there's only got to be accusations and they're suspended from Palace of Westminster, etc. And they're really toughening up on it. Now, I'm not suggesting we're going to go anywhere near that. Okay, well, we'll move on. I think you've got the feeling anyway, Debbie.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I don't want to prolong this, but of course, attached to this report sets out how Welsh Government are proposing to amend it. So the question is, do you support the proposed amendments? Yeah. And the proposed amendments are set out in the supporting paper from Welsh Government. So they are giving wording which does align to the Richard Penn report, but how they are proposing to change the law. So, yeah, I think we should see some positive change there.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I see clarity from the minutes and for the viewer? are we actually going to, are you agreeing with Debbie's recommendation for delegated
Yes.
authority? You are?
Yes,
as
we
a
are.
committee?
But
That's fine.
It's stronger.
For guidance for the ombudsman, statutory
yes,
guidance, yeah.
it was
Okay.
discussed, if you like. Yeah.
Thank
Going on question 11. Any comment there? Or the APW? No. 12. Awareness of the ethical standards framework, publicity materials. Have you got any point there? No. This probably concerns us. Advertising for independent members should be removed. How is it intended to advertise then, Debbie?
This relates to just removing it from newspapers. So it would be then on the website or existing networks as I've set out there. So what we do find in the council is that we don't tend to have too great a response. You may think differently, so really interested to hear what you have to say via newspapers. But you know, if independent members on the panel say, well, actually, that's how I did spot the vacancy, we can obviously tailor the response in that regard. But I suppose it's tempering it, isn't it? That if you didn't pick up the vacancy via that mechanism, you know, it is quite costly to place adverts in the newspaper. But yeah, interested to hear what you have to say.
Yes, well, actually, I did. That's how I did pick it up, it was the Gem in those days, and I didn't know anything about it. I wouldn't have looked at the website, and I think unless you want independent members who are not in the know and are outside, in order, Ronnie.
Thanks. I just wanted to, as it were, reaffirm that point, Chair, and say that I came across the advertisement in a newspaper as well. I think from my perspective, Debbie, you also need to recognise that there are some people who are not computer literate, and they may not pick up that vacancy by any other method. And I would suggest that, as it were, that may have an impact on the more deprived sections of the community, because people in that area and people in that towards the adverse end of that spectrum tend not perhaps to have access to computer equipment. I'm making a generalization there, which may not be warranted, but I'm just offering it as an observation. So I think from my perspective, there are dangers in actually removing the need to advertise in the papers. But having said that, I suppose it would be a case of try it and see what happens. Thank you.
Lorna?
Yes, I was a newspaper person as well. So that's 3 of us so far, Debbie. That's not looking too shabby, is it? I just wonder, actually, things have moved on, haven't they? And a lot of the newspapers are online now. So I don't know if that's going to impact on the cost or the readability. But yes, I was a newspaper person.
Gerwin?
Yes, I was a newspaper person as well. I mean, there are a number of people still in our society who rely on the printed word, and I think it would be a bad move to remove the need to advertise, or the ability to advertise in the press.
Pat?
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I totally agree with my colleagues. I'm a newspaper person as well, the Gem. And are the cost implications that great? Because if you think the timing of our appointments, myself and Lorna and Richard were all appointed at the same time. Consequently, if we're going to be replaced, that is one advert going out for 3 people. I'm not sure whether Richard and Alex and Ronnie came in, but are the costs that great, bearing in mind that there are the advantages that actually going to the press gives?
I won't ask the councillors to comment on this, on the quality of the independent members that have been got through paper, but I think Debbie, I think our answer is is going to be no then, on the basis that all four here have come. And I don't know where I would pick it up as otherwise. I really don't. I mean, unless you read and notice that. There we are. Okay. So I think we changed that. If you will change that one, please. Former council employees. I agree with that. No. Everybody happy with that? Well, then 14B is not applicable. 15. Do you agree? The answer, do you agree that the life should be removed? No, you're, so we're keeping that on. Standard committee summoning witnesses and sanctions. Should standards have the power to summon witness? The answer there is yes, but in view of what Gerwin has said, do we want to reflect on that, on how we would actually do it, Debbie?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just having a look through the supporting papers from Welsh Government on this very point about Standards Committee, and it doesn't, albeit it's referring to the fact they feel that, you know, it would be important for the committee to have that power because of the nature of the matters being considered by the committee and the consequences. It doesn't go into the practicalities of if somebody doesn't adhere to that. So I think certainly from the Standards Committee perspective, it's worth identifying in the response about consideration being given to the mechanism for dealing with that should somebody who is summoned fail to attend. So I think, consideration needs to be given by Welsh Government about how that would be addressed.
And I think the issuing of the summons and serving of it as well is important. So I think that answer can be changed. Okay. Question 17. Are we happy with that? Yeah. Good. The Welsh language. I think that's it's neutral. Everybody happy with that? 20. Oh, you've gone back to 18 there. Which we've gone through. Your answer to 21. Any and the answers to that, any issues on any of those? Yes, Councillor Birch. You're on silent.
One day I'll get it right.
Yes.
Right, sorry, I'd like to go back to 18 and 19, and I wondered whether because this is a public committee, whether we would be obliged to provide simultaneous translation for any members of the public that wanted to watch.
Sorry, Karen. Oh, Debbie.
Yes, I mean, this is, as you may be aware, this is something which is actively being given consideration, and indeed I have a report going to Cabinet this afternoon on the hybrid meeting platform, and within that is an element dealing with our multi-location meeting policy, and this very point about Welsh translation is picked up. And I'm referring there to canvassing of members, but also in the bigger picture, looking, because of the MLM policy, looking at the issue of members of the public wishing to speak. Well, they wouldn't be able to speak in Welsh at this meeting because it's not a public meeting, but wishing to hear the meeting in Welsh. So that is part of, shall we say, a sort of a council-wide piece of work that we are addressing, and it'll be via the MLM policy. So yeah, that certainly has general applicability.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I think that concludes item 11. Debbie, there's a little bit of tidying up to be done there, but that can be done. And if you're happy that Debbie will consult with me, and I'll agree to that. I'll surely agree to that. Right. Item 12, the draft terms of reference for the Standards Committee panel. We've had a meeting, Lorna, Ronnie and myself, and with Debbie, and we've come up with the terms of reference. Any comments or observations, or anybody objecting to that? Pat, is your hand up? You're silent, Pat.
As the Standards Committee is now obliged to provide the annual report, should there be reference in the terms of reference for the committee as contributing to the annual report? Because it is now becoming a standard requirement, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't follow that.
Right. The annual report that we prepare, the standards, is a new innovation. The bottom line is you actually go ahead and do the hard work on it, but it does come to the Standards Committee for agreement. So should that be as part of the terms of reference for the Standards Committee?
No, well, no, the terms of reference is relating to a separate matter.
Sorry, I'm not with you, Richard. The terms of reference set out the tasks to be undertaken by the Standards Committee, doesn't it?
No.
No, this one is to do with the councillor who was sent to prison.
Oh, sorry, Richard. I think I'm been on the wrong issue.
Yeah, sorry, we've moved on.
Sorry.
These are the terms of reference. It was Ronnie, Lorna and myself, with help from Debbie and Karen, have come up with those. That's what we're going to work on. The time scale is probably, it'll be by the November meeting. Debbie, Gerwin, do you want to comment first?
Well, I made my views clear on this at the last meeting.
And that will be included.
Could I just go to paragraph 2? I think you're setting yourselves a very ambitious target if you're going to consider whether the culture and practices within the Vale provide sufficient robust opportunities, etc. I think that's a very ambitious target you're setting yourself if you're going to pursue the matter to that extent.
I think we'd be quite happy to restrict it, but I'm not quite sure how. I think we have plans how we're going to do it. We're going to, speak to the various people, or I'll get reports and see what it's like. Whistleblowing. If there is a whistleblowing, is that strong enough, etc. Debbie, do you want to comment?
I did want to comment to say that I think we missed a recommendation off the previous report. There's a recommendation about amending the threshold for gifts. Our current threshold is £50, and there's a recommendation that it's reduced to £25, so that we align ourselves with the approach that we're adopting across Wales. So I just, for the purpose of the minutes, I just wanted to make sure that had been considered and agreed by the committee.
I think that's been considered and agreed quite a few times, but
well,
Lorna,
it wasn't mentioned this morning,
no,
so I felt it
right. Yes, Lorna. On mute.
Yeah, got it. Just to go back to Gerwin's point, no difficulty with what Debbie's just said. I agree it's a challenging aim, but I think we have to aim high. That's the whole point of this. We have to be assured, and we've discussed how we would be assured and how we might find that we're not assured, when we review these matters. But I think that terms of reference stands for me. I think, yes, it is a challenge. Yes, it's ambitious, and quite rightly so.
Thank you. Okay, so can we take it that everybody's happy with those terms of reference there? Good. Okay, well, we'll work to that, and we'll let you know in September how we're getting on. Next item is correspondence with the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. Debbie.
Yeah, very briefly in part one, this will be the corresponding report into part two, where I'll give an update on correspondence which is of a confidential nature with the Ombudsman. So this is just for noting, and then after we move into part two, I'll give you a very brief overview.
Thank you very much. Item 14, any items which the chair has decided are urgent. There aren't any, are there, Karen? No.
No, Chair.
So that concludes part one. We'll shortly move into part two. Karen, you'll have to make some arrangements for the recording to stop, I think.
Yes, Chair, but could I please have a formal declaration by the committee that they want to move into part two?
Yes.
For the records.
Everybody
Move
happy with
part
that?
two.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll now turn the recording off